Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yo, I got a lot of shit to say, so I'ma do this every day. I'll be writing things until I'm fucking buried in my grave.
In a shocking turn of events, ICE conducted its biggest raid ever for a sanctuary city.
Meanwhile, in Boulder, Colorado, we apparently find a sanctuary city for anti-Semitic terrorists.
Artificial intelligence is all the rage right now, but one of our guests warns that it could usher in communism.
Always remember to read the terms of agreement before you download an app. The Marxism is in the details.
And not every NFL team is gay for Pride Month, just some of them.
Spoiler alert, I'm not very proud of my favorite franchise.
Nor should you be. Blaze News The Mandate starts right now. Good evening, Patriots. I'm Jill Savage, joined as always by Blaze News Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson.
Life is good. I think despite our opening, we're seeing a lot less crazy ideology this month in June than we did last year.
Absolutely. I mean, you'll still see plenty of pride flags that are out in Boston, but you're also going to see fewer illegals there after ICE conducted its biggest raid ever. Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons gave some raw numbers during a press conference earlier today.
These brave men and women have worked tirelessly to arrest approximately 1,500 criminal aliens and illegal aliens during Operation Patriot. In the beginning of May, ICE and its federal and state partners launched the whole-of-government effort to remove dangerous criminal aliens from all over the Commonwealth.
Andrew Arthur is a former federal immigration judge and resident fellow in law and policy at the Center for Immigration Studies. So, Andrew, thanks so much for joining us here tonight. So, this raid, obviously, it's a pretty big win for the Trump administration. But where does it all go from here?
So this is part of a much larger plan by the Trump administration and border czar Tom Homan to first get criminal aliens off the street and then encourage other aliens whose only crime was entering the United States illegally, which is a pretty significant crime, to leave the United States voluntarily. But with respect to the criminal aliens, keep in mind, Jill, that every one of these criminals that was apprehended by Todd Lyons and ICE officers as part of Operation Patriot is a person who was likely known to the Biden administration. Very few of these people, committed their crimes or were convicted of their crimes, just since January 20th. These are individuals who are allowed to live in the state of Massachusetts months or years and continue to prey upon the local population, including almost exclusively on the immigrant population that the politicians in those areas claim to care so much for. So, Tom Homan, Donald Trump, Todd Lyons, they're taking efforts to actually make those communities safer and to make our streets safer.
Art, given what we saw this weekend in Massachusetts, and given what you've seen throughout the country with these states and cities and their initial reaction, which is certainly negative in many of these places, to the Trump administration, how much leeway do they have? How do you think this plays out?
When it comes to
push back.
Operations like this, when it comes to operations like this, they actually have very little leeway. If they attempt to interfere with federal enforcement operations, that's a federal crime. Now, if they simply, tell the locals, what their rights are, if ICE comes to them, it's probably, perfectly within their rights. But the only reason that ICE has had to take this action in Massachusetts is because Massachusetts won't let ICE officers into the safe confines of the local jails. That's where, when I started my career almost 33 years ago in San Francisco, of all places, the then INS was allowed to go through, identify criminal aliens, take them into custody, and get them off the street. Now, our officers are having to put themselves into danger by going into the community and finding these individuals. Hopefully, Matt, these communities realize the frivolity of their ways and will come around. But until that happens, ICE is going to keep operating.
I was going to, but then
signals
I
to
don't know.
places like
I
Massachusetts
mean,
that deem themselves sanctuary.
nobody
Well,
replied to me
Boulder,
on
Colorado, everybody knows
Discord.
about the anti-Semitic attack that happened over the weekend. Of course, he was here illegally and 8 people were injured. Let's go ahead and listen to Glenn Beck earlier today.
A man, not a citizen. I want to make that clear. Not a citizen. Not even a guest of our country anymore. An illegal immigrant whose visa had expired not once, but 2 times. Why was he here? How many more like him are here, hiding in plain sight, walking amongst us?
All right, that's what I want to dive in here with you. How many are there actually hiding in plain sight, like Glenn just mentioned there?
So when you're talking about the the unauthorized population, as they refer to it as a whole, the center conservatively estimates that it's about 15.5 million people. It could be higher. In fact, it's probably a lot higher. But we base that on the Census Bureau's community survey. But, when you talk about visa overstays like this, back in 2015, then Senator Marco Rubio estimated that about 40% of the unauthorized population here were people who had been admitted to this country as non-immigrants who promised that they're going to leave at a time certain and go back to their homes abroad, who didn't. And this really is the part of the migrant crisis that festered under Biden that we don't talk about. We talk about, the people who poured illegally over the border, but we don't talk about all those people who were rubber stamped at visa offices abroad, allowed to come to this country, who just didn't leave. So, yeah, I mean, it's a significant problem. We could be talking about anywhere between 4 and 6 million visa overstays like Mr. Solomon. I mean, this is a real problem, especially since, one, we let them in. We were at least hospitable to them, and then they didn't comply with our rules. Part of the Trump administration's plan is to go after those individuals too. Every alien who's present in the United States, legally or illegally, is going to have to register. Secretary Noem announced that a few months ago. If they don't, they're committing another crime. But if they do, we're going to know where they are, and we can go and take action against them before another tragedy like this can happen again.
So when it comes to the practical side of this, I mean, obviously we have lots of federal judges who are obstructing what the president is trying to do, what the administration is trying to do. And there's discussion about just practically, right, how to make this happen. If it's possible to change the system, if it's possible to change the policy and actually, put all these people through the system in some way. Do you have any thoughts about that? I mean, first the federal judges, and then practically how this ought to be done en masse, especially given the state, the ideological state, I guess, of so many judges, both immigration and federal.
Yeah, and I mean, Matt, when you talk about the federal judges, some of the biggest abuses have largely gone unnoticed. The district court in Maryland, for example, issued a standing order that gives a stay to every alien facing removal who files a habeas, even though most of those individuals are by statute not eligible for habeas. But, I think it's time for the Supreme Court, if it's going to continue the credibility of the federal courts, to rein in those district court judges. Otherwise, much like most of the media and a lot of academia, in their zeal to, fight Trump or resist Trump, they're going to undermine their own credibility. But with respect to the immigration system itself, we have about 700 immigration judges. President Trump,
I mean, we can if you guys want to.
is going to get a whole lot more money for more judges to speed that process along. But the Trump administration is also using some very inventive tools to address that. We've seen that individuals who were waved in through the ports of entry and paroled into this country are now being taken into custody when they show up in immigration court, and they're subjected to something called expedited removal, which is much quicker than going to removal court. But we also see, various efforts by DHS Secretary Noem, Tom Homan, to encourage those people to leave illegally, or to leave now while they still can, before they have to be taken into custody, before we have family separation, before any of that happens. And, paying people $4,500 may seem a bit excessive. We're paying them $1,000 may seem excessive and get them a $3,500 plane ticket, but it's a lot cheaper than the $17,100 that each deportation costs from beginning to end. So, the Trump administration is thinking outside the box. They know they've got a problem, and they're using every shot in their locker and every tool in the toolbox to address it.
It's fascinating to have you on. We've talked with other people about the habeas corpus issue and the idea that really doing this would just drown out the system. What are your thoughts specifically about that?
So Congress in 1996 and 2005 strictly limited the availability of habeas to aliens who were facing removal from the United States. And really what we're waiting for is, one superior court, be it the circuit court or the Supreme Court, to step in and actually, enforce those boundaries that Congress put on. It put those boundaries on for exactly this reason. Congress doesn't want district court judges being star chambers at which, one judge sitting in, San Francisco or Baltimore can basically make immigration policy. So, that's a significant issue. Again, the rules are there. We just need to have the rules enforced, and this process will go a whole lot more smoothly.
Well, we know that Stephen Miller has come out and said that he wants to see 3,000 people a day right now getting deported from this country. As a former federal immigration judge yourself, I know that there's more resources coming in the big, beautiful bill, but we're not there yet. So what are the current limitations that we have right now in this country to make those numbers a reality?
So back in 2012, my then colleague, John Morton, who was Barack Obama's first ICE director, estimated that ICE had the capacity to remove about 400,000 aliens per year. And, we could expand that by using military assets, by, enlisting the help of other federal partners to help ICE in its duties. But, at the tops, you're probably going to get to about 1 million people per year. The other part of that, though, the part that encourages people to leave by themselves without being ordered deported is much more effective and will prove to be much more effective. Right now, I get calls from people all the time, questions, asking me about, what's the likelihood that this person's going to be removed from that one. The word has gotten around in immigrant communities that people who are here illegally had better leave. And I think that, it's going to take a while. We're going to have to go through the numbers from the Census Bureau to figure out how many of those people have in fact left. But Joe, I think that's really going to be the much more impactful part of the Trump administration's policies. It's going to be those people who pack up, who have made their money, who go home. Not so much the number of people who are deported.
Andrew Arthur, great stuff. Thanks so much for joining us here tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Chris Bedford right after this. We know that family farms are continuing to shut down, and it's not going to be from a lack of hard work, but it's all that meat in the grocery store. It's not coming from them anymore. It's actually coming from overseas, and you don't know what the quality is over there. The labeling, questionable at best, but you don't hear that in the headlines. But over 85% of the grass-fed beef that's sold in grocery stores right now is imported, and most shoppers have no idea. Good Ranchers doesn't just sell meat. They guide you back to the American ranchers, to real quality, to food that you can actually trust. Unlike imported meat, all the Good Ranchers products are 100% born, raised, and harvested right here from local family farms in the United States. And every order that you go through gets the people that have spent generations upholding the legacy of American ranching. And Good Ranchers has some of the best meat that you've ever had, and you can definitely taste the difference. Father's Day is coming up. They have their King Cut box, which makes a great gift. It has the thick cut ribeyes, the thick cut New York strips and fillets. It's a feast fit for a king. Your dad's definitely going to love this as a gift. So if you subscribe to any of the Good Ranchers boxes today, you'll get your pick of free meat for life. That includes, you can choose from Wagyu burgers, hot dogs, bacon, or chicken wings in every box with a lifetime of your subscription. And if you use the exclusive code code Jill at checkout, you get an extra $40 off. So visit goodranchers.com to shop American meat you can trust. Remember, use that promo code Jill for an extra $40 off. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. Do you ever feel like liberals are studying conservatives like we're some rare jungle species? Like they have no idea what to do with us. Well, according to Chris Bedford's latest piece, Conservatives in the Midst, that's not too far off. So welcome, Chris Bedford, once again. Please walk us through, this liberal analysis of Trump's policies that you've highlighted in your latest Beltway brief, because it feels like they have absolutely no clue what to do with us and Donald Trump as a whole.
Yeah, you're right. So I was reading this interesting piece from a guy with just the perfect pedigree in foreign policy, and he wrote something that, is not going to be actually very popular with foreign policy's readers, which is that, hey, by the way, Donald Trump actually has a coherent policy. He's got ideas. He's got a plan. That there's actually something behind this. It's not simply chaos. And then if you walk through, he's not really wrong, but it's sort of things that are just rather obvious. So he says, first, Donald Trump wants a more conservative society. He wants law and order, and he puts this in quotation marks. He says so-called traditional values, as if values don't have tradition. He says, secondly, Donald Trump wants to remake the economy. So he takes kind of normally Republican policies like deregulating, lowering taxes, but he also adds trying to reshore American industry, which is something that, both parties, well, more Democrats actually previously have talked about than Republicans, and now it's been a major thing for Republicans for 10 years. Then the third, he said that he wants a new.
All right, good. I'll set up again for tomorrow for sure, Oklahoma.
In charge of the executive branch, they keep on throwing out these things. Independent agencies, independent departments.
Hey, drop in the Rumble channel. I'm gonna switch over to Rumble exclusive pretty soon, guys.
Branch. So that's a whole new political system, having control over your executive branch. And then battling, how dare he battle with the courts and with Congress, which is actually really what the framers always envisioned, that there would be some jealous defense of power. Wouldn't it be nice if Congress occasionally jealously defended its power? And then fourth, he wants to change America's role in the world. Now, they say they're turning away from the global values and the global values-based system, which is just a bunch of nanny-panny for liberalism and globalism. And he's turning towards a foreign policy that says that you should essentially put just interests of the United States first in all kinds of foreign policy decisions. Now, what amazed me about this piece is not that it's wrong. It's that it acted like it had found some kind of decoder, like it had found the Rosetta Stone. There's 77 million, I think, or more than that, was how many people in America voted for Donald Trump just in November. And they're decoding what conservatives believe, like they're Jane Goodall watching chimpanzees. It's gorillas in the mist time.
I'm gonna leave the scanner up tonight.
Structure their family unit around a mother and a father.
I'm listening to it now. It's popping off.
Every day they go to this strange pointy building, or every Sunday they go to this strange pointy building. We don't understand what goes on inside. It looks like some kind of sacred ritualistic behavior. They never talk to people. They don't do the reading. They're not reading the primary sources. The kind of ignorance you see of even just conservative political history is wild. Remember during the debates where Ron DeSantis accused Nikki Haley of moving forward with pale pastels and not bold colors? He kept on using that line. It was overdone, honestly. But that's a reference to Ronald Reagan's, a famous Ronald Reagan speech, that we must not move forward with pale pastel banners and copies of Democratic policy. We need to have bold banners and bold colors. The internet of left-wing political journalists, who are, let's say, do this for a living, erupted with people saying it was a sexist comment about her dress. How stupid could they be? And these are people who've been doing this for decades. So it shows you that they don't read the primary source documents. You can find Donald Trump's foreign policy and basically a whole huge aspects of his domestic policy in like the Sharon statement, an early National Review back before I went kind of wacky. You can find this all throughout. We can run it to Blaze News tonight. You can listen to Glenn's show. You can learn so much about this stuff and not have to simply guess it like you're trying to decode things. And by the way, this guy, he's one of the smart ones who's actually trying to figure it out as opposed to just saying it's because we're stupid or racist.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon to watch. I mean, so you're really, if you are somewhat intelligent or care, you're not, a complete hack. You have to ask yourself this question if you're a liberal, because of who runs the world now and because of the results of the election, right?
This is a great problem.
It's a wonderful problem for people to have. It's an invitation to learn, an invitation to evolve and grow mentally. But you also point out that how we get here, post World War II, the absolute dominance, right, of post World War II liberalism has been apparent. I mean, this is why conservatism exists in the manner it does. It's sort of a reaction by Buckley and others after the World War to say, this is ridiculous. People forget God and Man in Yale is written in the 1950s. And he's talking about how Yale's a bunch of godless communists then. And so I suppose that these people, if we're going to give them some benefit of doubt, just grew up in a world that was so dominated by this stuff. Our friend Charles Kessler calls the last century, the liberal century, that they had no interaction in terms of education, elite social networks, etc.
Yeah, they feel like they're just the only, not just the dominant political force, which they honestly have been, to your point, to Charles's points, for a century. But they feel like they're the sole American tradition. If you went back, just like you were talking about, to right after World War II, the essential idea was that the only properly American political tradition that was real was liberalism. You could go back to the guys in Concord. You go Walt Whitman. You could go Henry David Thoreau. You could go up to John Dewey, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, obviously. These are people, this was supposed to be the only truly American idea. And conservatism, they understood, existed. In Europe, there was conservatism, and they put that more along the lines of monarchists and people who wanted the church to rule, which still did exist quite a bit in the 40s. And there's still strains of it in Europe today. Or in America, they considered, if you were a conservative, you were a grandma who doesn't like rock and roll. It was more reactionary. It wasn't an actual coherent philosophy. And Russell Kirk, in his book, which, exactly to Charles's point, he wanted to call the conservative route, it ended up being called the conservative mind, was one of the key forces, along with others, in drawing together all these thinkers throughout history to illustrate that in America, in the founding, through men like John Adams and his son, you can trace a tradition that goes back to Edmund Burke, that goes back to London and common law, that goes back to Jerusalem, goes back to Rome and Athens. You can trace this idea that tradition matters, that men are spiritual creatures with spiritual needs, not simply material needs. That society is linked between the living, the dead, and the yet unborn, and we're all connected. We're carrying that onward. You can link this. And he kind of put this to bed for a while. They were still winning. And Republicans were best described as controlled opposition. They really didn't push back on domestic policy. The Overton window was constantly moving every 4 years. How dare you talk about this? How dare you talk about that subject? How dare you talk about that thing we just changed? We saw it on absolute fast forward with COVID, with this trans insanity. I mean, people just had to stop paying attention after a while because these experiments work better when you do it over 20 years, 30 years, as opposed to essentially overnight. None of this trans stuff was around when we started in our careers. So this is completely new stuff, and they've been exposed. It's been overreach. Honestly, I think that COVID itself may end up being a total blessing for the American people because it exposed so much of how much is broken.
Well, Chris Bedford out there in his natural habitat, surrounded by built-ins. I don't know what we're going to do with you, Chris. I don't know if we can make out whatever this weird conservative thing you have going on out there right now.
Oh, yeah, they'll try to study us. They'll watch us. They got the ring cams peering through their windows, but I like to keep them on their toes.
You have to. Hey, thanks so much, Bedford. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
See you then.
Well, is communism in our future? Is it going to get any better? Don't worry. We'll have the answer for you right after this.
12 million, 15 million, 20 million. Nobody knows the actual number. And what did we learn from 9/11/01? They were at war with us. We were not at war with them, the 9/11 Commission report. They're plotting, planning, and scheming. This is a terror attack. I'm worried about the big terror attack, and of course my prayers, my thoughts, my sympathies go out to the victims here. But do you not agree that if we don't find these people soon, that we are at risk of a 9/11 or worse?
A 9/11 or worse. I mean, CIA agent himself sitting there asking a question, but if he thinks that we would get into something that was eerily similar to a 9/11 type of situation, gee, I wonder if he doesn't have any inside scoop on any of that. Come on, Hannity.
I wonder.
It's coming. I mean, why did...
It's coming.
I didn't say that.
That's what he said straight up. He said it's coming.
I didn't say that.
That if we don't find these people soon, that we are at risk of a 9/11 or worse?
It's coming. I mean, why did 2 million illegal aliens?
He even got Hannity to go, ugh.
I didn't hear you, Handy.
I mean, why did
that is going to be the catalyst for these increasing calls for communism. You know, whether it's happening or not, certainly, as you mentioned, UBI is going to be the first thing that gets amped up out of the gate, which is, you know, theoretically challenging since we've had so many pilot programs and derivative programs, you know, things like the Biden bucks that came out of the Biden administration that caused all that inflation. We've seen this fail over and over again. And by the way, our government doesn't actually make any money, so pretty hard when you don't make any money to offer universal basic income. But I think that's going to be the first thing. And then, you know, depending on what happens and which route we go down, but if you start to see large chunks of people displaced, you know, at a time, and the unemployment rate goes up, I do think that that's going to be a catalyst for questions about ownership. You know, why should these handful of tech companies be able to own all of the robots, and, you know, why should they be able to sell them, and shouldn't we all participate in the fruits of the labor of the robots, since we're not the ones who are actually going to be doing the labor anymore? So, you know, my fear is that, you know, one, that before anything even like that happens, that we'll start marching down that path, and we'll see the usual suspects calling for types of things that limit freedoms, limit choice, a lot of collusion with tech, and even more calls for communism. And then, you know, God forbid we actually do start seeing this implemented, instead of thinking this, you know, how do we actually make people benefit from this, you know, widely. I think that it will be pretty quickly a call for, you know, dictatorships, communism, something that is very anti-individual rights.
So this is a complicated matter, I know, but when I hear this, just at a big picture, I want to stay with the big picture for a second. I immediately think of this rising debate about regulating AI. And, you know, my instincts are to favor a lot of people who I consider more pals, you know, the Andreessens of the world and the accelerationists who are sort of saying, look, and I agree with them, if you start regulating heavily, you're going to have woke AI. You're going to have, you know, this being used by governments for centralized control. On the other hand, it certainly is a technology that's so powerful, it's akin to saying, you know, nuclear weapons will be completely, you know, unregulated. So how do you navigate that? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, these are the discussions that should be happening every single day at every single level. I want to address the first piece about woke AI. I read a tremendous Substack, I think it's called Tree of Woe, that's arguing right now that, you know, just as the left took over the culture in so many ways, from mainstream media to Hollywood to, you know, so on and so forth, that they've actually done the same thing with AI, and that even Grok, the X platform AI is centrist at best, but most of them are very left-hand coded, and that if the right doesn't catch up, that with or without regulation, that we're already going to get very left-coded, very woke AI, and that's going to be foundational to the systems and architectures, which from there, as you can imagine, is going to create the environment, regardless of regulation, that is going to be very unfavorable. So I think even before we get to regulation, that's a very serious concern and something that we should be thinking about right now. In terms of regulation, while I'm normally a states' rights kind of person, I think that regulation at the federal level probably makes more sense, because the nightmare from both a business and an individual rights standpoint, trying to figure out and navigate a patchwork of all these different state AI regulations, I think would make it very difficult and make it almost impossible to compete with others. And then that's kind of where you get to, okay, well, let's preserve our individual rights in a digital area. The other thing, though, that is the sort of the competing thought here is that while we want to do the right thing here, you also have these bad actors all over the world, whether they be states or terror enterprises, that are also going to have access to AI that eventually is going to probably get to AGI, get to eventually super intelligence. So we also have to make sure that whatever we're doing that's protecting our rights doesn't put us at a disadvantage on the global stage, because that could impact not just our rights and our security. So this is a very, very difficult set of problems with lots of different outcomes. And I think we need many more intelligent people, and not just tech intelligent, but EQ type of intelligent people, having these discussions and shaping the discourse and acting, which is something that we usually don't do. We're not very
All right,
proactive.
we're heading over to Rumble exclusive, guys.
We're usually very reactive, and I don't think that we have that luxury, because by the time that it gets here in the format that will create concerns, it will be too late. We need to be having these thoughts and discussions now.
Well, Carol, I'm glad that you went there, because it's where I wanted to take the conversation. Because if you're going to talk about regulation in the United States, sure, we can talk about that all day. But what is China going to do, and how is that going to impact this, and how on the global scale, right? That's where it's very difficult to go state by state when you are going to have nations who might not have